Good evening, it's 8 p.m. local time here in Warsaw. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight. Coming up, the security of the Polish and European borders will not be subject to negotiations with anyone, says the Polish Prime Minister. Donald Tusk's announcement to suspend the right to asylum has stirred up huge controversy. In its response, the European Commission recalls international responsibility and the right to asylum. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. Joe Biden is to visit Germany and media outlets have pointed to a new date. The construction of the East Shield, a new line of defense against potential enemies, has started in Poland. The Law and Justice Party may be interested in gaining control over one of the biggest private TV stations in Poland. Poland's government is facing backlash over its new migration policy, with both the European Commission and the Speaker of the Polish Parliament weighing in on the issue. But Prime Minister Donald Tusk is not backing down. Aaron Damen has more.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is standing his ground. First this.
In the coming days and weeks, I will be discussing the specifics of the situation in Poland in Brussels.
Then a strongly worded post on social media.
Our right and our duty is to protect the Polish and European border. Its security will not be subject to negotiation with anyone. It is a task to be performed, and my government will perform this task.
Across Europe, countries are tightening their belt on migration. Border checks in Germany, threats from Hungary to bus asylum seekers to Brussels, and over the weekend, a new hardline target in Poland to reduce illegal migration to a minimum.
I will demand recognition of this decision in Europe.
Donald Tusk's move has been quick to draw backlash.
We are of the opinion that the right to asylum is sacred in international law and results from conventions ratified by the Republic of Poland.
Do not focus only on your borders. By the time refugees and migrants reach them, governments are under political pressure to make reactive decisions.
Though the Prime Minister's own camp is backing the case for a tougher border.
I think we did our bit. We do not support a chaotic policy. We want Europe to have a policy. And the first policy is you have to control external borders.
Ahead of a late-night cabinet meeting this evening, a statement from 3 years ago was also hanging over Tusk's head.
No one wants to live in a country where the authorities pose a dilemma, security or humanity, and that's the dilemma they are putting us in today.
He maintains his new policy is due to a hybrid war by Russia and Belarus against the European Union. The European Commission says it's aware of the threats, but is sending a cautious reminder to Poland.
Member states have international and EU obligations, including the obligation to provide access to the asylum procedure.
One expert says the intent of Tusk's move is crystal clear.
When we hear the statements that are being made, they sound very populistic, they sound very isolationist, and they also appeal to people who would be located in the center of the voter spectrum.
Months out from Poland's presidential election, domestic politics are in full swing. As for relations with Brussels, only time will tell if smiles and handshakes remain the status quo.
U.S. President Joe Biden will reportedly travel to Germany on Friday to discuss aid for Ukraine. At the same time, Moscow is getting more support from its allies as well. North Korean soldiers are reportedly preparing to join the war in Ukraine. Krzysztof Panek reports.
Biden's upcoming visit to Germany has not been officially confirmed yet. Reuters has reported its date, citing sources in the German government. The same source reports that the visit will not include the usual formalities, but will rather focus on the talks about aid for Ukraine. Biden was set to attend a meeting of the Ramstein group earlier this month, but cancelled his trip due to Hurricane Milton ravaging the southern US. Germany has been key to the Ukrainian war effort, as it provides significant financial aid to the country.
Ukraine, as it both tries to defend against the Russian offensive in the east of the country and as it pursues its own incursion into Western Russia needs to have assurances of support for its territorial integrity and its sovereignty. That means economic assistance, financial assistance, and military assistance.
While Western countries are coordinating more aid for Ukraine, Russia is also receiving support from its own allies.
We see an increasing alliance between Russia and regimes like North Korea. This is no longer just about transferring weapons. It is actually about transferring people from North Korea to occupying military forces.
Ukraine has already reported killing some North Korean troops, although those were not directly involved in combat operations. A Ukrainian strike launched on Russian positions in the Donbas on October 3rd has reportedly killed around 20 North Korean soldiers. North Korean troops would help Moscow with its manpower issues, as Russia has been experiencing significant trouble in attempting to recruit more soldiers.
When the Ukrainians came into Kursk, the vast majority of the Russian soldiers were young conscripts that weren't able to effectively thwart the Ukrainians in their plans. And there are reports of naval shipmen being transferred to do an infantry job, which is insane.
With the war in Ukraine turning into a war of attrition, being able to recruit fresh troops is becoming more important. The necessity to recruit new soldiers can be mitigated by losing fewer soldiers in the first place. Effective frontline medicine is key to modern warfare. Polish volunteer medics who gained experience treating wounded Ukrainian soldiers have transferred their experience to Polish troops.
Our foundation has organized, along with the soldiers of the 1st Warsaw Armored Brigade and soldiers of the 18th Brigade of the Territorial Defense, a medical training based on our experience gained as volunteers on the Ukrainian front lines in multiple difficult sectors.
The experience gained in the war in Ukraine will help prepare Polish troops for dealing with wounded personnel in a possible conflict.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has visited the first drills that show off a newly planned defensive line in Poland's northeast. But the so-called East Shield demands integration with NATO allies to be effective, and it needs to defend against other things than just tanks and troops. Reported by Michiel van Bloemsteen.
This is how a conventional attack on Poland could look like, at least according to the Polish military. The exercises in the northwest of Poland are meant to demonstrate how the East Shield defence line should hold off an invasion in practice. It runs along the entire Polish-Belarus border in the east and north along the border with the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. Physically, the East Shield represents multiple layers of obstacles. A wall, razor wire, dragon's teeth and hedgehogs, trenches, minefields and even moats are used to slow down any attempts to advance. The main feature, however, is its surveillance system, which allows for rapid response to threats. There are plans to use drones and a host of other surveillance devices to gather information that is interpreted by AI models. But for the East Shield to be effective, it needs to be integrated with the defences of the Baltic countries. Poland has been touting their East Shield to NATO as an integrated part of defending the alliance's eastern flank.
When we're talking about Poland or Lithuania or Finland, for example, these countries are facing the same kind of threat, and they have the same, of course, objectives in mind to fortify their borders, because, we know what's going on, we know the war against Ukraine, and we know, of course, that Russia's aggressive intent has not changed.
The Polish government claims coordination with its partners is coming along nicely.
It is a joint operation, not only Poland, but also of the Baltic countries and Finland. So I'm happy that they are working with us on this. The British and Americans are also ready.
But defence is not just conventional warfare. Russian hybrid warfare, for example, uses other things than troops and tanks.
And this can, I already mentioned, the use of migrants as part of the de facto, a quasi-military operation. If you bring a lot of people and ask them and prepare them to storm the border, well, the border has to be defended.
The East Shield alone will cost around €2.5 billion. The Polish government hopes that its spending spree will give its voice more weight in debates around defence.
This year we managed to reserve 4.2% of GDP for defense. Thanks to smart policies, this will rise to 4.7% of GDP for defense, again the highest within the entirety of NATO.
NATO collaboration is indispensable. A main weak point in NATO's defensive line is the so-called Suwałki Gap. A Russian force could occupy it to isolate the Baltics from the rest of the alliance. The defence perimeter is slated to be completed in 2028.
The Lithuanian Social Democratic Party has won the first round of the national elections, securing a lead over the ruling Conservative coalition. With 18 out of the first 70 seats, they are now poised to negotiate with other left-leaning parties to form a new government. Jeremy Chłodniuk reports.
This is how the members of Social Democratic Party of Lithuania celebrated their victory.
I feel really happy about the results. Although we still have work to do, they show that people in Lithuania want change, that changes are really needed. This was reflected in the regions, but also in big cities.
The party's victory marks a shift leftward in Lithuanian politics. The party has vowed to tackle the housing problem in Lithuania, as well as the health and education sectors.
I think domestic issues, as everywhere and as always, economy is number one topic. Also, human rights, social issues are the most important issues that people talk about.
But without a clear victory, the Social Democrats will have to form a coalition. The party's leader said she has already made arrangements with the For Lithuania Party and the Farmers and Greens Union to work together as future coalition partners. But whether they will rule Lithuania is not yet certain.
If you look at the final result, I mean, the difference between Social Democrats and Conservatives, who are on the second place, is still very minor. Just one seat is in between. And, we are still facing the second round.
The elections, the first since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, were held in the shadow of the conflict and fear of Russia. 3/4 of Lithuanians living between pro-Kremlin Belarus and Kaliningrad believe that Russia could attack their country. But while the government in Vilnius is set to change, NATO and EU members' strong support for Ukraine and moves to bolster defense policy are to stay.
I think Social Democrats is a traditional party which have good experience in previous ruling time, and I think in our international cause we not have big differences, especially connecting to Ukraine.
The final balance of power in the new Lithuanian parliament will be known in 2 weeks. On October 27, a second round of the election is due to be held.
The European Union has imposed sanctions on pro-Russian regional officials and a Russian-backed organization in Moldova. The move comes after a journalistic investigation uncovered a vote-buying scheme aimed at undermining crucial upcoming elections. The sanctions include an asset freeze and a ban on the transfer of funds from the European Union to the individuals and the organization. The sanctioned officials were also banned from traveling to the European Union. In a statement, the EU's top diplomat Josep Borrell described their actions as, quote, massive direct attempts to destabilize the country, end quote. Journalist Mariuța Nistor's investigation revealed how Russian money financed activists, recruited paid protesters, and bribed people to vote for Russian-friendly candidates. Moldova is going to the polls on Sunday to elect their president and vote in a referendum on joining the European Union. The opposition Law and Justice Party may be interested in gaining control over one of the biggest private TV stations in Poland. Newsweek Poland journalists have revealed that the station might be up for sale soon, and one potential offer from Hungarian investors is due to be supported by Jarosław Kaczyński's party. Paweł Trzaskowski has this report.
Wyborów kopertowych nie doszło.
Mail-in elections, Pegasus surveillance, and the visa scandal. These are just a few topics about the former ruling coalition covered by TVN, one of the biggest TV stations in Poland.
For 8 years, the station kept an eye on United Rights actions.
But this media giant might be up for sale soon, and Law and Justice is reportedly interested.
They are trying to buy TVN for years already. It's a kind of obsession. They seem to believe that they are losing elections because of TVN.
According to Newsweek, 3 offers are on the table, one from the PPF group, registered in the Netherlands, one from an undisclosed American broadcaster and one from Josef Vida, a businessman behind the Hungarian TV2 channel.
TVN is a valuable asset, bringing a lot of profits, and sometimes companies are selling the most valuable, even the most valuable assets to get cash.
As a political party, Law and Justice cannot buy a TV station. But there are ways to gain influence over it, and this is why the Hungarian offer, which has ties to politicians from Hungary's Fidesz party, has raised concerns in Poland.
This is popular, liberal, and very influential in big cities TV station, which piece is missing.
Law and Justice is said to be on the lookout for a new media outlet, as they lost control over state-owned media after the parliamentary elections last year. During the party's 8-year tenure, however, these media had been repeatedly accused of spreading propaganda and supporting the ruling party.
They were retaining a tight control of the state-owned TVP, as well as the Polish radio and so on.
A supposed bid to gain control over TVN is a surprising twist, as the party went to great lengths to ban the station from broadcasting in Poland.
It is unacceptable to pass a law against a single economic entity that plays an important role in the media market.
The so-called Lex TVN legislation had sparked mass protests in the station's defense and was eventually dropped. The company's management has not commented on the possible sale. TVN is currently owned by Warner Bros. Discovery. It was founded in 1996 by Polish businessman Mariusz Walter.
US-based Ace Moglu, Johnson & Robinson win 2024 Nobel Economics Prize. The award for their work into why countries succeed and fail is the final prize to be given out this year and is worth $1.1 million. Bogumił Radajewski from TVP Nauka is in Stockholm, and here's his report.
Promoting democratic institutions is promoting economic growth. That's a message coming from the Nobel Committee in Economic Sciences, with this year's prize going to Daron Acemoglu, Simon Johnson and James Robinson. These three American economists have been recognized for the study in the role of social, political and economic institutions and how they affect prosperity. This year's laureates have studied a number of countries and their development across a couple of hundred years since the times of colonialism till today. And they have come to a conclusion that inclusive institutions, mostly associated with democracy, tend to bring long-time benefits in terms of economic growth.
They have made two important contributions. One more empirically minded, where they have introduced new empirical methods to try to quantify the causal effects of economic institutions on economic prosperity. The second thing is a theoretical contribution that helps us understand why institution and institutional change or institutions are so persistent, and why it is the case that even countries where they have more weak or inefficient economic institutions, we do not observe change going on.
Democracy cannot be viewed as a simple panacea. That's what Daron Acemoglu said, answering our questions regarding the role of democratic institutions and economical prosperity, as the most important thing are not just institutions like democratic elections, but certain core values like the rule of law, which govern the behavior of societies across long periods of time. And last, let's remind that the prize in economics is the only one that hasn't been mentioned in the Alfred Nobel's last will. It was actually established in 1968 by the Swedes Central Bank and is being awarded according to the exact same rules as the other Nobel Prizes. From Stockholm, Bogumił Radajewski.
The decision made by Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk to temporarily suspend granting asylum by the Polish state has sent ripples through a multitude of international media outlets and prompted an outcry from human rights organizations. The move was said to be motivated by the need to respond to the hybrid war conducted by Russia and Belarus against the European Union. To talk about this migration U-turn by the Polish Prime Minister, I'm joined by Andrzej Byrt, former Polish ambassador to Germany. Thank you so much for joining me here on TVP World.
Good evening.
So I would like to start by a quote. No one wants to live in a country where the authorities pose a dilemma, security or humanity. And that's the dilemma they're putting us in today. This was Donald Tusk quoted by the Polish press agency in August of 2021. What could make a politician of his standing, Donald Tusk's standing, change his mind so drastically over those 3 years?
The political situation, not only in Poland, but also worldwide and in our direct neighborhood. There's not only the war, aggressive war of Russia in Ukraine, but it's also the reflection of that fact, practically worldwide, but also with a big accent in the European Union, as a result of an anxiety which has opened its doors after the big arrival of migrants in 2014. And then difficulties which in different countries within the EU, the increased number of immigrants have caused. The shift in political opinions went towards the right, sometimes very negative political milieus, which have pushed the fears within the European Union to such an extreme situation that in very many countries, populist parties have gained power. Let's quote Netherlands, Austria quite recently, but also in such big countries, stable democracies like Germany, France and Italy. These parties has got quite a big influx of people who said, I'm not that much sure whether the situation for myself and my kids in the future will be stable enough to feel myself at ease. And in order to stop it, several countries, including Germany, as I said, France and other countries, the politicians at the very helm of power decided to look very thoroughly on the migration policy of the European Union, but also on methods and actions which probably have to be taking into account exactly the war in Ukraine and danger which exists there and which can be spread all over the European Union. So it's a kind of a correction of today's Poland's Prime Minister as compared to his attitudes so many years ago. And he must take it into account also because of political situation within Poland. We are approaching quite a big battle, that is presidential elections next year, and therefore in order to prevent inaccessible shifts in attitudes of different actors of this big run for president's job in Poland, he decided to be more precise and talk about, say, migration policy as viewed from Poland.
So is this shift in the Polish Prime Minister's approach towards the migration policy is going to open floodgates across European countries? What kind of message does this statement that was issued on Saturday, what message does it send to other European countries?
I would say this message has provoked quite a big uproar in the media, in the political circles in Europe. But as a matter of fact, it's not so to say, a big provocation. It's rather kind of a reminder that we should look very thoroughly on the already voted migration policy of the European Union, taking into account, as I said, the situation around the European Union, and particularly measures taken by Putin and Lukashenko, which try to use, among others, Polish eastern border, which is...
And Europe's eastern border.
Exactly, which is also a European eastern border, and therefore to provoke other colleagues to think once again and maybe envisage necessary adjustments. I don't say that is necessary just now, but the debate within the European Union is absolutely a kind of a priority.
But you mentioned certain adjustments, and considering that Germany is upping their border controls in recent weeks, do you think that Germany, when it comes to the EU Commission's meeting and Donald Tusk presenting his ideas, do you think that Germany will actually support him in that claim
I wouldn't like to put any bets now what will be the result of the potential debate.
But you might have your opinion on this.
Watching the German press and electronic media, as a matter of fact, if you look at it, they probably withdrew from making any dramatic comments. It looks like as if they were released, that Polish Prime Minister, also highly experienced pro-European politician in Poland, decided to say also to provoke slightly their German colleagues at the very top of political ladder, and maybe then giving them a chance to present more deeply their own visions of common migration policy.
Obviously, there are different sides to the story, and we need to present the whole landscape. Poland would not be the first country to introduce this. Finland suspended asylum temporarily in May this year, and yet we have Article 56 of the Polish Constitution stating that foreigners can invoke the right to asylum in Poland within the conditions outlined in the legislation. It also declares that a foreigner fleeing from prosecution can be granted refuge status in accordance with the international law. So if we had that asylum suspension, that would mean that this could be potentially a discussion not only about migration, but also the rule of law. Is this even legally possible?
Well, contrary to very many voices which have been expressed, it's not a denial of I would say, this humanitarian framework of migration policy so far, or also of adjustment of asylums. No, it's a kind of a warning, I would say, that if a situation develops in such a way that it would require some more decisive steps, then we should take them into account. What these measures could be, we are still, as of today at least, we have no very precise ideas, because, as a matter of fact, tomorrow the government will accept probably general outlines, and then it probably will start also debate.
There was a cabinet meeting taking place today at 7 p.m.
Yes, that's it. And then we probably tomorrow will know what are the major points, more pragmatic ones, and then probably it will not be immediately introduced into our own Polish law, but it probably be a starting line for debate where also critical views could be expressed, and then we'll try to find kind of a compromise.
And last but not least, if the EU Commission was not to agree to that proposal, what do you think is going to happen in the relationship between Poland and European Commission? How is that going to affect that relationship?
No, it won't affect our relationship at a very short distance, because development of EU policies in the past, today, and also in the future is a product of a compromise, of a debate. So we shall start to present our arguments. We, Polish ones, other countries, their own, and as a result, probably the Commission will find a kind of a balance.
And what about long term? Because you mentioned short term.
Yes, in the long term is no problem whatsoever. We have probably to adjust quite a fresh migration policy pact, which was voted, as we know, earlier this year. But in the meantime, situation has changed, and we cannot foresee 100% with 100% accuracy what would happen next, because we have to know that such steps which could be taken now by Poland together with other colleagues or countries from the European Union will be observed also by Ukraine, by Russia and Belarus, and they will probably try to adjust to that. We cannot foresee what would happen, but there is a major conflict still ahead of us.
Most definitely, and we will, I suppose that the eyes of Europe and perhaps the world are going to be looking at Poland tomorrow during the cabinet meeting, and we're going to find out more.
Absolutely sure, that'll be the case.
Thank you very much. Andrzej Bert, former Polish ambassador to Germany, was my guest. This would be all the latest news and features now here on TVP World. Thank you so much for joining, and please stay tuned for more.